Hey guys, this is Akshay Sura. Today we will be talking about migrating your existing Sitecore content management systems media library to Content Hub DAM digital asset management. Now, the reason why this is so crucial is a lot of the customers we are seeing move from existing Sitecore CMS where they have a ton of media assets. We're talking about gigs and gigs of PDFs, images, videos, and these need to be somehow ported over to the DAM, and it's not an easy way to do it. So there's a process to it, right? So in order for us to even start doing this, check out one of the videos we had recently about integrating DAM into the Sitecore CMS. Again, it was by far the easiest integration I've ever done. It was pretty straightforward. Once you do that, all new associations with your images, whether they are in the image fields or in the rich text editor or anywhere where you choose media from, will start pointing to Content Hub DAM, which is great. But then we still have to go through these existing media library items in order to get them to DAM. This is just a screenshot of one of the plain 9.3 instances. Not a lot there, but just to give you an idea from a media library perspective. Sitecore CMS can get pretty complicated depending on what you do with it, right? So for instance, we're talking about how you version media and even items, because now we're dealing with references for media items in your regular items. If you're multilingual, that's an added layer of complexity. Any customizations you've done with media fields, any customizations you've done with items which select media fields, shared fields which are linking to media items. So it gets a little bit complicated in terms of how you version languages and how you version items inside a specific language as well. So you have to almost cater the solution to your situation or the current customer you're working with, but this is a good start. So in terms of importing into Content Hub, there's different ways of importing assets into Content Hub. One of the ways which is recommended is import by Excel. So basically you have this Excel schema where you have different attributes for an asset inside of Content Hub based on your domain model for DAM, for m.asset. But essentially you're filling out the row with all the metadata. You're also specifying a public URL, and then that would let you once you upload that Excel file, that would let you, Content Hub will pick that up, add those assets, and then use those public URLs to pull things. But again, we're dealing with a humongous media library with existing assets which are currently used on the public site. We need our existing content to change and the content references to those media items to change. So it's a lot of things you need to do. The other way is you can upload files. So if you can drag and drop files, great. If you wanted to drag and drop zip files and then have them extract, again, in the image processing section, you could add additional steps to do that. But then again, the problem is that you're dealing with gigs of this data, and this is browser based, and imagine uploading humongous zip files, or even if you break them up, just the amount of work that is involved in it. The other way, which uses the Excel part, uses this, which is you could paste all the public URLs for your media items. Again, when we're talking about thousands and hundreds of thousands of media items, this is not really feasible. And when you're looking at from an API perspective, unfortunately, there is no way of uploading a media asset as a raw file. So that's out of the question. The only way you could do it is you could do it API based. You could create a bunch of things, but then at the end of it, you'll fall back into this, which is you would have to give a public URL for Content Hub to consume it. So Essentially, we're looking from a content management perspective. We have a ton of content in media library. We have a ton of content in our content tree, which links to those media library items in multiple ways. So image field is one, rich text is one. There's, any customizations you've done, custom fields you've done. So if you take an image in an image field, the first part you see up there is what you usually get out of the box for if you link to a media item, right, for an image. And then at the bottom, there's an example of what you get back from if you had the DAM integration for Content Hub, and if you selected you created a public link. Again, remember, when you are selecting a media item from CMS or even in Content Hub and you're trying to create a public link for it, the public link is unique to the different sets of conditions. So for instance, I have a media of my logo. I need it in this specific height and width, for instance, which is 200 by 400. That'll be a new public link. I need another one which is 1200 by 700, for instance. It's the same exact asset, but it's a second public link. Both of them are different. So if you look at it, you have the asset ID, you have the thumbnail in there, you have the source, you have the type, you have alt, which is unfortunately just the name of the raw file which you first uploaded, the height and width. And we'll talk about this, where we ran into an issue where the alt necessarily doesn't come from a meaningful attribute inside of Content Hub. So we need to extend that to add an alt attribute and then pull the value from there and modify the existing integration for DAM inside of the CMS system, Sitecore CMS. So we'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to quickly go through this. So from a rich text perspective, when you look at it, there's complexities, right? So this is just an example for an image, but when you're talking about a PDF, for instance, you'll have an anchor link, which will have a link attribute, and then it will, pull the ID and then assign the link at runtime to that. So that's another case we need to capture, but I just wanted to quickly go through. For an image, you can have an alt, you can have a source, width and height with the way currently it is. By default, the base configuration for Sitecore CMS. But from a Content Hub perspective, when we add a link inside of a rich text, now you see the alt, you just see the source. And pretty much, like I mentioned, the source, which points to a public link inside of Content Hub, defines what height, width they are, and different rendering options that public link carries. So if you have custom fields which deal with media items, not just images, you would have to tweak those a little bit in order to replace anything you're using. So basically, at the end of it, it's find that and then find whatever the replacement is in the rich text, and we need to replace that. So it's something which you need to work on. And again, alt tag is a big issue out of the box, so you need to implement customizations to fix that. What's the ideal solution, right? So in my mind, the ideal solution is, hey, here's my Sitecore web database, which has all the published assets inside of my media library. Look through it, pick all of them up, and then somehow magically move all of them into Content Hub. And then once you move them to Content Hub, create the public links for each of those assets, and then come back and then go through my content in the Sitecore master database and update those references. So find the references for the media items, update those references with whatever the public links in Content Hub are, right? And at the same time, in Content Hub, I need to be able to find these pretty easily. So maybe have an asset type called Sitecore CMS and have the tags which represent the hierarchy of where the asset is. So existing content authors in the Sitecore CMS can easily find these items which used to be in the Sitecore CMS but now magically appeared in Content Hub. That is what we are what would be my ideal solution. And obviously for each of these each of the customers or the solution, the problems you're dealing with, you might have to tweak this a little, but that's the base of all of it. Now, how did we try to achieve it? So, we wanted to look at it a little bit different. So, I'm going to go off the bat and let you know that what we tried to do is try to be minimally invasive. What does that mean? What that means to me is I'm not trying to, add a layer of, hey, you need to do a code deployment, you need to open these ports to your production CM, you need to do this, you need to do that. We're trying to be as friendly to a situation, a customer, an organization, and make their lives easy. So, if we have a copy of the production database, there's a content freeze that's on your local and you're trying to run it, great. If you're running against a production CMS, great. If you're running against a stage, it would work too. So we try to make it in such a way that when you're crossing boundaries, we're trying to make it as least intrusive as possible so that you are able to do these processes. So the first process is run on the Sitecore on the web database. So we have an ASPX page which doesn't need code compiling. You would run it locally if you need to. If you have a copy of the production database, all it's going to do is going to take all of the information from the web database. It's going to pick up things like the item ID. Remember, we have to come back and update these things. So item ID, the alt, the URL, it's going to come up with the public URL. It's going to package that in a JSON. And then it's going to push it to the Azure queue. Why an Azure queue? Why can't you run it on a local .NET Core? Very good question. But what you're going to not get from a local ASP.NET Core app, even if you do multi-threading and you want to tax your current system, is be able to process this at scale. I'm not talking about 10, 20, 200. I'm talking about thousands of these requests going through your queue. So if you have a beefier machine, you want to run it on an ASP.NET Core app locally to do the processing, good for you. But what that involves is us making several requests into Content Hub, right? So we're trying to say, hey, is there an asset type called Sitecore CMS? If there isn't, create one. Here's an asset I want to create for image, say logo.svg, for instance. Create the asset. Tell me what the asset is. Oh, by the way, this asset has these taxonomies, it has this alt text, and then, once the asset is done, we're like, okay, now run the fetch job, and this is the public URL. Once the fetch job is run and it pulls the asset inside of Content Hub, then once the fetch job is complete, which might take as long as however big your asset is. So if something like a logo.svg might be a few hundred K, boom, a few seconds, right? But say if you're pushing a PDF, which is 10 meg, 20 meg, 30 meg, whatever that is, the fetch hub is going to have to sit there and wait 30 seconds, check again, 30 seconds, check again, 30 seconds, check again. So there's a process involved. So yeah, you fetch, you wait, and then if you're done, then after that you say, hey, generate a public URL for this and let me know what it is, right? And then you also have to take into consideration your Content Hub instance is also performing all of these as jobs. So there's no guarantee that I send a request, it's done in a millisecond. No, you have to sit there and then you have to wait for these things to complete. So I really think that Azure Functions gives you a very good way of having this layer where you don't know how long you're waiting for, but at the end of it, once all of the processing is done for single asset, it'll get pushed back and then it'll be in the completed queue. And again, we're using queues for everything, so it traverses through queues. So you create the asset type, create the asset, then add the tags to the taxonomy. Did you add the alt tag? Fetch the media, wait. Is the media done? Yes. And then you pick that up and you say, okay, generate public URL. Is it done? Once the public URL is done, throw it into the completed queue. Coming to step 3, we basically pull those completed queue messages for the assets, go back into Sitecore, and then say, hey, you know what? In the master, find me an item. Find me this media item, find all the references. So you go to the links database, get the referrers, which version of the item you need to modify, which item where the source is for this media item, you go and you update it. If it's a image field, you know what to do. If it's a rich text field, again, find and replace. If you have custom fields, you would have to deal with them accordingly. So it kind of gets interesting and as well as complex depending on your item versioning, your language versioning, your customization. So it's a little bit involved, but today we'll try to show you the best we can how these were updated. Setting the scene. As you can see, we have our Content Hub assets. Currently there's only 4. On the right, what you see is that I have a Functions app running locally, but it's looking at the queues which are on Azure. This is mainly for debugging purposes and to show you the progress. If I run it on Azure Functions itself, it'll be kind of hard for us to follow through. Here we have a CMS system. What we're looking for is this asset. Currently looks like it is pointing to the media item which we're going to push to Content Hub, and we want to see it transform when we do come back. So again, no smoke and mirrors, everything's working the way it's supposed to. What we will do is we will try to push these messages, about 10 of them, and then see how this transforms and how we get it back. Again, you know, right now we only have 4, but we'll run through these. Yep, and then we have our .NET Core app on the left, which is responsible for pulling things and pushing things. So let's go ahead and push. So if I push the messages, what you should see is we push 10 messages, we got the messages, and on the right, we're going to go through a lot of process of pushing messages from one queue to another and essentially processing everything. So as you can see, now the damn queue is 0, and as we are processing more and more and more and things, we're getting a public links and things go to the created queue, we should start seeing messages in the completed queue. But right now what will happen is the fetching takes the longest, and sitting and waiting those 30 seconds or 15 seconds takes a long time. So I'm going to pause here and come back when we start seeing the fetch messages. Yep, as you can see, a lot more processing, getting public links, and you can see a couple of the links created. So now we have 5, we'll wait for 10, and then slowly the process on the client end will pick up once we finish all the batch, and then we get back all the completed messages for the batch we sent out. So looks like it's already processing on the client end. So as we're getting messages, it's pushing those updates into the Sitecore CMS, and the message count should drop. Now if we get back in here, refresh, we should see a ton more of the images which came in right on here. So if you look at one of these images, and then this other assets looks like PDFs and things of that sort. So we got our asset. You can see the base, we tagged it with the type CMS. We have the alt text which we pulled from the media library. We have a custom attribute. We updated that with what we had in the media library for the media item. We have the CMS tag. So here what we've done is we've actually tagged it with the path of the media item, so that content authors now doing work inside of Content Hub can easily find this. So these CMS tags and the alt tag and the types, they make it easy for you to find it in search. So we thought it would make sense for us to do that. And you can see, you can see those tags in here. And then as you also notice, we have the public link. If I copy this link, open it up, you have the public link for that. And as I mentioned, every public link has a bunch of attributes. So if I picked a different rendition, if I resize to a specific output, if I crop it, the public link you're going to generate is going to be different. So on the same exact asset, you could have multiple public links. So now let's go back and look at what has happened on our CMS. So we are hoping that the link itself changed on there. So let's go take a look. Come back in here and take a look. It got replaced with the content hub in image tag. We have the asset ID, we have the source, and we have the type, which is image, and then the alt, which is alt is my new best friend. And it's pretty simple. So the same exact principle you can apply to rich text fields to find and replace. Of course, rich text will get a little bit complicated. You could either use the agility pack or regex to find and replace either links as an anchor tag or images as links to the media library items. But once you run through this at scale, you will have a really good piece of content which points to Content Hub now instead of your media library, and at some point you could remove your reduce the size of your media library. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're more than happy to help you out. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you need help in Content Hub or Sitecore, we live and breathe Sitecore, so just reach out to us in public channels. Here's some of our information if you want to get in touch with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. We produce quite a bit of content, so hopefully you'll be able to follow us on there and keep up to date with what's happening in the Sitecore world. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video.